Welcome to the Exploring New England podcast with Ryan Zipp, where each week I will be talking about what makes this historic region such an amazing place to enjoy. From the scenic views to road trip ideas to where to grab the best eats and much more. Let's get going. Hello and welcome to episode 10 of the Exploring New England podcast with me, Ryan Zipp. It's crazy to think we're into double digits now. You guys have been traveling along with me. So here we are about 2.5 months later. So it's wild. Can't thank you all enough for continuing to come along with me and see where the next stretch is going to take us. So last week I talked about the next blooms that we chase here in New England, the lupine flowers, and how the most well-known and iconic spot for them is up in the White Mountains in New Hampshire in the tiny town of Sugar Hill. So I kind of talked about the spots to go check them out there, of course, where to take photos, where to have some good eats, some beverages, and also where to stay. I also talked about the surreal experience we had here in New England just about, I guess a couple weeks ago now. I forget exactly, but May 10th, with the Northern Lights happening here in New England. And we're able to get unprecedented shots in many areas, especially for me down here in coastal Connecticut, where I never would have dreamed in a million years that I'd be able to photograph these familiar scenes of mine in my hometown and nearby with an incredible Northern Lights sky behind them. So that was unbelievable and something I'll never forget. So I said this week I would kind of continue with the lupine planning information and some other kind of June-inspired trip ideas around New England. So we have part 2 there, and then also another recap of what I got myself into last weekend with my camera again. So a little recap, a little planning again. So here we go. The week before Mother's Day weekend, I was home and local to spend time with the family. And for the 4th year in a row, had everybody over my house. So it was a great time, and was glad that we're able to do that, get everyone together and celebrate all the moms. And then with the upcoming weekend being a holiday, Memorial Day weekend, I typically tend to stay local for those, as most people are off and clogging up the roadways and hotels and beaches and everywhere else, restaurants that I would like to go. So this past week, I was like, well, I need to just get somewhere even for a little trip, just because I'm just not traveling too much overall in May. So I was thinking about where to go, and even though I was just there a few weeks before, I ended up heading back to Cape Cod for a quick visit. And, a visit there for me is always a good one no matter what time of year, but especially now. I think I've talked a number of times on the podcast in previous episodes about kind of this slightly off-season being a good time to visit spots that normally would be much busier, much more expensive, and the Cape during May, up to Memorial Day, fits that bill just as well as any spot in New England for that. So there had been this one spot that I've been wanting to check out for a little bit now, and it's called the Heritage Museums and Gardens, and that's in Sandwich. It's a large property. I believe it's 100 acres. It's not exact. It's right around there. And just a beautiful landscape of all sorts of gardens, trees, shrubs, flowers, kind of sweeping lawns, buildings, treehouse. It's alongside of a lake there as well. There's some paths. There's also a really cool section that's actually like a car museum, these old like Model Ts and other really wild looking cars as well. So it's definitely an interesting spot, and they have a number of different events throughout the year. They do a holiday display around Christmas time. I've never been to that. They also have a hydrangea display festival in the summer, a little bit, from now, which I've never been to either. And what's going on now is their Rhododendron Festival, and that's going on from May 17th till May 27th. So I was kind of there for the early stretch of it, and by the time you guys hear that, you'll still have a few days to get out there if you'd like. And I assume they'll still have some blooming. I think it's open most days, so you'll have to go to their website for all the details. Admission for me as like a non-member adult was $22, I think, and that was no time limit, and I didn't have to be there at any set time. It was like I just had a ticket for the day. I think they're open 10 to 5, I want to say. Yeah, it was my first time there, and definitely felt bigger than I expected. I honestly didn't know what to expect, but I went there to see the rhododendron blooms, and there's a cool story behind it. The guy that actually owned the property that the Heritage Museums and Gardens is now on, his name was Charles Owen Dexter, and he owned this property from 1921 to 1943. And what he did, kind of as something I believe I read, he had like a health condition, and the doctor told him he needed to relax, so he started crossbreeding rhododendron plants, and some really beautiful ones, but they weren't able to survive like the Cape up here in New England during the colder months. So he crossbred them, and came up with all these different new versions of them to be able to withstand the weather up here, and grow all these beautiful flowers. And I want to say he ended up, to this day, I think it was like over 175 different hybrids of rhododendrons that he had his hand in. I think many of them were actually named and kind of designated after he passed away. But it was pretty awesome to think that I read he like gave a lot away to people he knew in different parts of the East Coast. So you have someone just kind of to to relax more, and for his health, he just started doing this, and now this long lasting display of what he was able to accomplish is not only here in the gardens here, but also in other places all over. So that's kind of what's going on now in May. And when I was there, this was, I think, the 19th, I want to say. So it was earlier on in it, and a number of them were blooming beautiful, like full bloom, but there was also a good amount that hadn't bloomed yet. So I would think that's why there's time, and it's staggered over the like 10, 11 days. So, whether you go early, you have some, you go late, you have some as well. But it was awesome just to kind of walk around the different paths. There's it's kind of like a self-guided tour. They hand you a map. So there's different spots where there's concentrations of them where you can kind of just wander. I stayed along with the guided tour for a little bit, and then kind of just wandered to spots that looked interesting to me with my camera. So I ended up doing a few of them backwards. But yeah, I want to say I spent a couple hours there. It was always longer than you expect, but honestly, I didn't know what to expect, and it was the only thing I really had planned for Sunday, like kind of early afternoon. So didn't have any time restrictions or anything, and just wanted to enjoy it. So it was definitely worth a visit, and it had me wanting to go back another time, whether it's when the hydrangeas are blooming or Christmas time when they have the holiday display. So something to just kind of, whether or not you make it down there for the end of this festival, the rhododendrons, or you get there another time of year, definitely check it out. It's a worthwhile kind of target activity to kind of base it, whether it's a day trip or you can add it into an overnight or weekend there. But yeah, some you're walking in some of these paths, you kind of feel like you're walking through the woods, and these rhododendrons, some of them got to be 15, 20 feet high. I would assume a lot of those have been growing for many years since he kind of started, which could be, I guess, upwards of 100 years, some of them, but some of them probably 75, 80 years plus if they were the originals that he planted there, which is really cool. They had a building in the middle that had a art display with a number of paintings and works that were of New England scenes throughout the different seasons. So I popped in to check that out. That was really cool. And Found a few blooming trees still, um, still there with some pink petals kind of coating the ground underneath. So I had some fun taking some shots of those for a little bit and really just enjoyed it. Obviously I documented, got some pictures, some video clips, but it was just really a nice, relaxing afternoon, and I was glad that I finally was able to make it there. So was able to check that off my list, and then once once you're there on the Cape, I had to stay and take advantage, like I talked about, of the off season rates and empty beaches and not busy roads and downtowns. So I definitely did that, and I was looking for where to stay. So I was just kind of checking out my usual Google Maps hotels for the area for the night I wanted to stay, and just kind of going through, see what was available, what the prices were. Also, if you don't, because I have an Expedia account, a lot of times some rooms are even a little cheaper. Not all the time through that, so definitely pays to take a little time and check that out. I ended up settling on this spot in South Yarmouth that was right on the beach, right on the water, and they had like an oceanfront room for, it was like I want to say 159 plus like the taxes and fees. So and I checked, and that room would be at least triple the price come like peak summertime to stay there. So it was great. I had a second floor room overlooking the water and the beach. Slept with the door cracked, so just listened to the waves all night. So definitely no complaints from me there. It wasn't very warm. The sun wasn't out, but still got those vibes in. And was able to walk right down the beach, down the road there to spot to have dinner and a drink. Spot there is called the Skipper, and it's one of those places, been there forever, one of those institutions, and known for like their chowder fried seafood. So I went with a fried clam strip roll and had a jalapeno margarita to wash it down, and then after walked back on the beach to my hotel room. So couldn't have asked for a better spot to stay, and definitely just fun to sometimes go away and have something be not too many plans. I really only had the stop at the gardens planned, and just where to stay. So so that was awesome, and kind of had a lazy morning. Woke up looking out at the ocean, listening to the waves. Took a drive, got a coffee, drove around a little bit, down through Hyannis, past the area where the Kennedy compound is, and then got back and relaxed a little more. Enjoyed the last little bit of the views there, and then took off to enjoy a little bit more of South Yarmouth. Walked around a little bit there after checking out, drove some coastal roads, and then made my way north to Dennis to have some lunch at the Sessuit Harbor Cafe. Had to have a lobster roll before I headed back to Connecticut, and it's a really good roll there. It definitely has more mayo than what I would prefer and normally kind of gravitate towards, but really fresh meat, really good, and I would definitely recommend a stop there. It's really cool. You're sitting out there. It's like marina area, a lot of boats around you, and water views. So definitely not bad at all. So it was a great little short Cape visit, and definitely check out the spots I told. The Heritage Gardens right now, Rhododendron Festival till the 27th, but also just things going on. I think you can go pretty much all year. They always have something going on, but check their website for all the info. And stayed at the Ocean Mist Hotel. Got a good off-season rate, which I'm sure they'll start going up this upcoming holiday weekend. And yeah, so that was a great visit. Keep an eye out on my page. Probably do a reel of that. It might be out already by the time you're listening to this. Sure I'll post some other stuff. If you follow me already, I'm sure you saw my stories from the trip, little recap already. And then now we are on to part 2 of the episode, which also happens to be part 2 of the lupine chasing around New England for June. And it's I talked about the first spot being Sugar Hill, the little town up in the White Mountains, which is most well known. They used to do a official festival there. They don't do anymore, but when people think of the Lupine in New England, that's definitely the first spot that comes to mind, and can't go wrong with small town vibes, beautiful fields, the White Mountains as backdrops. But as far as what I think is my favorite stretch to just enjoy them and photograph them is here, which is the next spot, which is coastal Maine, more specifically mid-coast and north from there. And my first trip up there for them was it 2021? I think it was 2021. But the spots I tried, everything was kind of peaked early, and by the time I got to a few spots I wanted to check out, they were kind of past and already half brown and just not very photogenic. So I think that's why last week I kind of said if you're choosing between time frames, I always aim a little earlier for the lupin. I'd rather have them not fully in bloom. They still look awesome, rather than once you start getting, past peak, they fade pretty quickly. And probably looking at like the first week in June for like the White Mountains, I would say. Again, it's different every year, so don't hold me to it, but that's kind of what I'm going with. And then for these coastal Maine ones, the spots I'm talking about now, like that June 8th ish, June 7th, 8th to like the 13th, 14th. They could hold on longer, they could peak earlier, so you kind of never know. But that's kind of what I'm rolling with this year as the averages, and all we could do is guess. So there's so mid-coast Maine is kind of basically when you get north of Portland. So you have your other coastal spots, and there are some lupin there in some other areas. I think Cape Porpoise has a few. I've never caught them in peak season. Some around Cape Elizabeth, near Portland Head Light is. But as far as where I think there's some better fields and spots that I like going, kind of starts when you get up to Harpswell area and Harpswell and Bailey Island, which is a kind of one of a favorite of mine to go any time of year. But you kind of get down to the end there in South Harpswell, also in Bailey Island. There's some spots of them there. There's also a cool fisherman's memorial down there, and there's some beach roses around it. So another cool spot to check out, Land's End, that spot is called. And when you're down in South Harpswell, there's another one of my favorite lobster rolls anywhere from Erica's Seafood. It's an amazing lobster roll. I've had it a few times now on different trips there. But also a great spot, Lookout Point there in Harpswell for sunsets. And there's a cool old inn there right near that Lookout Point where I've stayed called the Harpswell Inn. It's been there forever. I forget what year it opened. But that's a really cool spot to stay if you want that kind of rustic, old school coastal vibe. Nothing plush or new about it, but has that charm and location. So that whole area there, I love Harpswell and Bailey Island. And you have some lupin there that you can check out. Next area with a good amount of fields and some different areas, neighborhoods, I don't know what you want to call them there, is Bristol, Maine. And there's a number of great fields there along the coasts and inlets. And at the southern end of Bristol is the Pemaquid Point Lighthouse, which, if you've never been to, is one of the more iconic lighthouses in Maine. It's also kind of like an official park, I guess, and plenty of parking. I think it's usually, depending on what time you go, it might be a few dollar admission, $3-4, if I remember right, but definitely worth it. And there was some lupin there in some different spots and gardens, as well as some different beach roses on other perspectives. But just the lighthouse there is awesome. There's awesome rock formations, really cool there, and just a great stop any time of year. So again, some of these I might be mentioning aren't just during June when these flowers are blooming, but they're great stops any time of year. So, but when you're going to look for these flowers, it's like whether you're early, you're late, even if it's not the only thing you want to see. This part of Maine is just amazing. The food as well is awesome, as you'll hear me talk about numerous lobster rolls, which if you followed me for a while, you know that I'm a big fan of those, and I can never get enough of them. And that's where the best ones are in New England, I think, is when you get up more north in coastal Maine here. So You have the lighthouse there. And first time I stayed in this area was at a spot not far from there called the Bradley Inn. That was one of the first kind of collab projects I did with Visit Maine. I stayed there and got some shots in the area. And that whole area there, Bristol, South Bristol, kind of next door to it, another spot where you can't go wrong, just kind of cruising the roads and seeing what you come across. The next spot up from there that I would say is a good home base, again, any time of year, but for more Lupine in the area, is Rockland. I love staying there. I usually stay at 250 Maine Hotel. They've hosted me a handful of times already, and couldn't be any nicer of a spot. And I love the vibe there. They have a rooftop you could check out and looking out right over the harbor. That's where they have the lobster pot Christmas tree in December. So it's if you ever head up there that time to get the holiday vibes, great place to stay. You look out your hotel room window, there it is in the water. But up there, some good restaurants in the area. Camden isn't far. Rock City Cafe, coffee shop right in town you can walk to. Love it there. Great breakfast sandwiches. They also have called Maine Morning. It's like blueberry and maple latte. Definitely one of my favorite coffees I've had up there anywhere in Maine. So recommend that spot. Also in town is a spot called Claws, which is another one of my top lobster rolls, I'd say, anywhere and in Maine. And then probably my favorite and what I think is the best lobster roll in Maine is McClune's, which isn't too far in South Thomaston. And also another location, a drive from there, is the iconic Marshall Point Lighthouse. That's where Forrest Gump ran down the kind of the walkway all the way down to the lighthouse and turned around in the movie, if you remember it. So if you're in that general area, again, just more stops that you should make if you've never been there before. But in that area where the Lupine are and some good spots, it's over in Owl's Head. And you kind of head out towards the park there, state park, I believe it is, and the Owl's Head Lighthouse. And there's some great lupin fields there. And, go check it out. There's some awesome views looking back to kind of the harbor there and then the lighthouse itself. So you definitely can't go wrong in that whole area. And the flowers are everywhere. So you just have to find them. And hopefully when you get there, there's some good ones in bloom. Then from there, you make your way north to another popular location, and that's up near Acadia National Park. And this is a place I've only been 3 times now, but one of the times I was there was right in mid-June last year, I believe. It was like June 11th through the 13th. But up there, the lupin are blooming. Kind of, I would say that's a perfect time to check them out up there as well. It's also a great time to be up there in the park and the surrounding area. Beautiful time of year, but it's not too packed yet. You get into July and August, you're definitely going to have peak season. Tons of people. Park's going to be real busy, tougher to get around, rooms more expensive, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a great time to go up there regardless. And where I found the best concentration of them there, over on Mount Desert Island, going down to Southwest Harbor there, I would say. There was a lot of good fields. You just have to keep an eye out for them. Keep heading down to Bass Head Harbor Lighthouse, which again is a great stop any time of year. You definitely have to check that out. The first visit of mine ever there was in September 2017. I went to shoot Milky Way during the new moon, and I stayed at the Seawall campground not far from there. So that was a great first visit, and I loved it. And just unfortunately only got back a few times. It's a little further from my usual distances I can kind of hit up with my 2 free days I typically have. Definitely a good time to go there. I had another great lobster roll at Beals, which is another well-known spot there. Quality lobster roll. That was great. So I can recommend that. I ended up staying right downtown Bar Harbor. I had never stayed there before. Stayed at the Acadia Hotel. That was a great stay. Tons of restaurants there. You can walk right down to the pier. I did that for sunset one day. Just a great view, and that's definitely one of those iconic spots. So if you've never been to Acadia and you're looking for an excuse to get up there, that mid-June time frame. Not too busy. Hotel wasn't bad, and you can find the lupin blooming all around. Like I said, more in Mount Desert Island and Southwest Harbor area. Then, from the drive there after leaving, I kind of took a little more inland route home and found some great fields in these random towns on side roads I hadn't seen anywhere from anybody, or they weren't on my target or anything like that. And that's the best part about it. You just have to drive these roads and find them. But when you get up to that, a little more north in Maine, they really can just be anywhere. So just have to keep your eye out, and especially if you have a co-pilot, make sure they're paying attention and see what you find. One of the other towns up there is near Augusta. Is called Whitefield. There's a field of them there, of the lupin. You've probably seen a lot of photos. There's like a little kind of barn building in a scene there. So I was able to get to that spot on one trip and get some photos as well. That's kind of the next stretch for these lupin blooms, is that mid-coast up to down East Maine to Acadia. And also just a great time to visit all these spots regardless if these flowers were blooming or not. Just not too busy yet. Temps are getting a little bit warmer, weather a little nicer. So, and plenty of good lobster roll spots opening up, which some are already open or probably opening up before the holiday weekend. So definitely consider it. If you don't get there this year, put it on the to-do list for next year. And as always, if you have any questions, hit me up. Always open to help you as far as where to maybe stay and good food options as well. So, yeah. So I thank you guys for joining me again. I think that's it for today for episode 10. And I'm recording this a night earlier than usual because tomorrow night, which is Wednesday, I'm going to be going out attempting to photograph the full moon rising somewhere here, most likely along the coastline. I haven't fully decided yet, but so keep an eye out, and if I'm successful, I'll talk a bit about it next week. So thank you guys for joining in once again. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube where you can see me and other images I'm sure I'll have up throughout this episode of the spots I'm talking about, or listen in Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, all the usual spots where you'd listen to your audio podcasts. And give me a thumbs up, good rating, subscribe, leave a comment, all that good stuff. So keep following along. Tell someone you think who might enjoy what we're doing here. Tell a friend, family member. Yeah. And thank you guys again. Thanks for your support. I'll see you guys next week.